Coach, coming off obviously a couple of really solid wins, SMU, San Francisco, LMU, San Francisco, what was the biggest thing that you kind of took away that you wanted to work on ahead of Pacific and Gonzaga?
I think just getting our coverages a little bit tighter defensively. I think we had some really good stretches, in particular versus LMU. We had some really good stretches defensively. That second half for San Francisco, we did some good things, but we've had too many inconsistencies that we just got to shore up.
Obviously, with all the injuries, the bench takes a little bit of a hit. You don't have as much depth coming off there. But how do you feel like you can get maybe a little bit more offense from Parker, ND, and Case, because they're kind of the three top bench, or the only three bench guys right now?
It's a big thing for us that we continue to need to get production out of the bench. We've had games where they've all stepped up and had good minutes and scored. And I think we did get some good minutes. Like Parker, when you look at his contributions last game, he had some huge defensive plays. ND, obviously, every game he comes in and impacts us on the defensive end and is getting more and more comfortable with what we're doing offensively. And I just think all three of them are really new to the system. They've got a few less minutes than some of the other guys, and it's just going to take another hopefully it's the next game, but it's going to take a little bit of time of them just understanding where to find their spots.
What is the timeline looking like right now for Isaiah and getting him back?
We're waiting on a couple more results, and hopefully the next few weeks.
I'm curious about your defense. You go from giving up 92 to Portland State in November to 59 against LMU, and then whatever SF scored. Like, when you think about just like your defense over the course of the last 2 months, like how has that gotten so better or got so much better?
Well, I think we recruited pretty offensive-minded players that picked up our offense. I'm probably more inclined to view the game from an offensive perspective, and so I think we all were fighting to become better defenders throughout the whole preseason. But once we started playing games and kind of seeing that, man, if we just play our game offensively, we're going to score, we're going to get whatever we want. We just got to lock in on defense because that's going to kind of define our season. And I think really just we've been preaching that. The guys knew it, but they didn't really fully understand that until we started playing these games and seeing how good we could be.
So you think it's just like a product of playing more games? Because it seems to me, I mean, you have lost, a lot of your best players as the season's gone on, but your defense has also gotten better. Is that just a product of playing more games, or how does that happen?
I think the belief and the understanding of like why it's so important, the why comes from playing more games. I think the other piece is hard work. Like we've got two really good defensive coaches in George and Jerry that have spent so much time. I mean, I've never heard defense been talked about in this amount of detail that these guys go into every single day. We have coaches walkthroughs an hour before every practice of what we're going to do and how we're making up new plays that the coaches can run through, that they can test our defense. And it's just been really fun to kind of go through some new ideas, and I think our guys are starting to embrace that too.
I'm curious how much of that is obviously you have a bunch of guys down, but having a bigger body like Tomas out there, you have Ethan and Dane, who are obviously tall, long defenders, comfortable on the perimeter. How much of a role do you think that's played in just having, I guess, bigger bodies on the perimeter as well?
It's a good question. When you I think size is a very big deal defensively, and just kind of bothering shots, and that length is important. The flip side of it is like Isaiah was our best perimeter defender. Cedric's a hell of a defender. He just creates a lot of havoc and activity, and so I lean heavily towards saying it's more of just the guys getting more connected and less of a personnel thing. And I think like our defense is really reliant on a connected team, and that's probably another big piece of it too.
You talk about your when you talk about your defensive-minded coaches, what have they learned over the course of this season, and kind of have you seen them approach the challenge of all that this season has brought so far with the injuries and the different matchups and all that?
I think it's helped us get more creative in practice, where we don't necessarily. Sometimes we didn't have 5-on-5, and we're going through different drills to put guys in a spot where they gotta move and they gotta make decisions, and I think it's helped us get more creative. But the big thing is just like the relationships with our guys. They've developed these really good relationships where our guys can trust them when they're watching film, and I just think when that trust factor's there, they get a lot more growth out of all those times that they spend with them.
And then we heard that folks are not allowed. Your team's not allowed to say the word Gonzaga until after Thursday's game. What goes into that rationale, and just kind of how have you seen your team approach kind of the daunting giant at the end of the week, but also obviously a game to play on Thursday?
I think we're just so good when we're focused on the process and we're focused on what's at hand. We've got a lot of guys with big goals. When we start talking about those goals and talking about the future, that's when we start getting lost with where we're at right now. And so we're just trying to stay focused on what matters, and what mattered today was having a great practice. What matters tomorrow is having a good weight session, having a good treatment, having a good practice, and we got to focus more on the process and less on the result.
Tried to look back at the history books. Did you coach with Eastern at Gonzaga in 2019, 2020? Is that correct?
Yeah, that was a rough one.
Yeah.
I coached in 2011 too. That was a little better game.
Okay. What have you learned as kind of being in that environment? Such a unique environment, just known nationwide. But what did you notice about that environment, and what are you going to tell your players about that experience going?
The first thing is it's loud. I think that's a big piece of it. Like, we got to be able to communicate. We got to be able to point and talk and get our message across. I think that's number one. Number two is we got to be consistent. That's the biggest thing I learned in 2019 is they were just a physical, aggressive team that continued to just be relentless every possession. I think that's something that they're going to do when we go play them, and we just got to be ready for a full 40-minute game.
I know it's hard to answer questions about Gonzaga before an opponent, but I have to ask, right now in those big games for Gonzaga, they're kind of struggling in the second half or maybe having bigger first halves. For you guys, it seems like quite the opposite. You're making those second half adjustments and then you're coming out a little bit stronger. Is that something that you imagine you could take advantage of on Saturday? Or I don't know, I guess what's the process of your second half adjustment in there as well? Because it seems like you come out and you have this great plan and it works at the snap of a finger.
I think, for me right now with this team that we've got, it's just different every week. We had a couple of week stretches where we could not play at all in the second half, and we were really good in the first half. You look at that San Francisco game, we finally woke up those last 10 minutes offensively and started playing, and obviously defensively too. So we just gotta, again, it sounds cliche, but just one possession at a time, like be where our feet are, and I think that's where our guys have kind of allowed those second halves to come more naturally, because we were getting too frustrated, I think, at different times in the second half, and it's just more about staying present.
And then I wanted to ask about the process, I guess, of practice when you have two pretty close games, I guess, with a quick turnaround on the road. Are you kind of saving things for maybe a practice or a walkthrough the night before Gonzaga, or do you maybe brush up on some things along for the week?
Yeah, so the way we've attacked it for the last few weeks is Mondays are more teaching days, a lot of film, a lot of shooting, a lot of recovery. Tuesdays are all about us, and we say that as a team, as coaches, we try to sneak in a few different concepts that might apply to Saturday or Thursday's game, and then tomorrow is all about Pacific, and so we're going to really lock in and make sure we understand the scout, and I think that's probably more. That's more focused on us than most teams. Most teams are starting their scout on even Monday or Tuesday, and I just think the way we play, being more read-based, we got to continue to be us.
Last one from me. Have you seen any changes? You bring a couple of Eastern players along with you, along with your whole staff. Have you seen changes in yourself as a coach from your time at Eastern just a year ago to yourself now in Pullman?
It's a good question. I feel like there's a lot of there's just a lot of craziness in year one, and I think it's allowed me to learn how to be more flexible and just be more open-minded. I think there's just so many unknowns every single day. You don't know what's going to happen every day, and what's the process for this or that. And I think it's helped us all grow as a staff to be a little bit more flexible and open-minded.
I guess you haven't started your scout on Pacific yet, but what do you know about them so far?
They play really hard. They have a very unique scheme, or a pretty unique scheme defensively. That's really interesting to me, where they try to force things to the weak hand. And their coach had a ton of success in Canada, and always have respected how they play. And I actually watched a clinic on him 7-8 years ago, and he does some good stuff, and I'm excited for the challenge.
You were there in person?
Huh?
Like you're in person at this clinic?
No, it was I think it might have been during COVID, like some online online deal. But I thought it was a very unique, kind of stuck with me, some of the defensive concepts that they have.
Coach, thanks for your time this week. Appreciate it.
Go Cougs!